Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit Quickie from the subreddit HFY, called Corporate Espionage, written by Regal Legal. The link to the original will be down below. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Do you know, John, they told me that you retired and went to work for the private sector. I really didn't believe them. I figured that meant the private sector like, me. I sipped on an expensive coffee while we sat in a nice Teresian cafe bordering the Kursky Park. I didn't come to the worlds like this often. My job kept me at the edges of our glorious nation, though. I'd made a few trips into the deepers to visit some of my plantations. It was good to know more about the products I dealt. Yeah, you're about as private sector as it gets, Hicks, he replied, and I nodded. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I never figured you for a private sector type. And then I find you here in a suit much nicer than any you've ever worn, at a cafe, drinking more expensive coffee than you've ever had in the agency. I thought you believed in the cause. I sipped at my drink once more. Truthfully, I had suspected he was addicted to patriotism. I figured that he got hard from the propaganda flicks that they made and probably played with the nation anthem as loud as he could while he had sex. But it seemed that I had been mistaken. I do. It's just that these days the best way to help the hegemony isn't through the imperial service, even in the agency. Look at yourself. You further humanity's position in the galaxy with your import and export business. I smirked a little and let out a soft chuckle. And before you mention that you're only in business thanks to the agency, just remember you're in business thanks to me more than anyone else. I got that program off the ground, and they still don't see the bigger picture. We need to enhance all of our industries in similar fashion, and I'm hoping that by proving myself with one company, I can either make them see the like or form my own group to do the same sort of work. That made me laugh, and I saw a few people glance my way, surprised by the sudden noise in the otherwise quiet cafe. 2 people were listening in, a woman in her mid-20s, brown hair, bald behind my left shoulder, and a man who had already begun his enhanced treatment in his 30s to right behind a book. An actual book. He forgot that it's supposed to turn the pages every so often. Yeah, you go talking about stuff like that, and you're gonna have a real short private sector career, and a real long dirt nap. You know me more than well enough to know that I wouldn't be competing with them. He frowned a little as I shook my head. They wouldn't give a crap about your intent. They won't allow anyone to work in anything related to their line of work. Would you, if you were them? He opened up his mouth, but I cut him off. If you still worked for them and heard that there was a clandestine organization growing within our country with corporate backing and no government oversight, would you be friendly? He closed his mouth and then tilted his head to the side for a moment. You forget that they'll know who I am, so they'd rather work with me than try to stop me because I'm the best. That made me chuckle once more. You're so modest. You're so modest, I sighed out, and then I started to reach into my jacket when he waved and instead pulled out a bill from his jacket and set it on the table. Well, that's a switch. Like you've noticed, I have a kind of money needed to actually buy coffee these days. I snorted and stood up, putting my jacket on, as I noticed the man with the book close it, and the girl start to gather her things as well. Amateurs. I always found it slightly insulting that whatever I met with agents, they left me with the bill. I mentioned and I made sure that my jacket was on properly. You forget how poorly field agents are paid. And the guys in the office who made the real money are absolutely not interested in meeting criminal scum such as yourself. He smiled as he said that last part, and I rolled my eyes. We began to cross the street and then head into the park. So should we ditch the tale before we really talk about why you called me here? I asked when she chuckled in response. They're mine. I made a face and looked over at him in surprise before glancing over my shoulder to see the man meandering behind us while the woman headed off in a less described path. Like a loop ahead of us in the park. They can't be. They're terrible. That made him laugh. We can't all be super spies. They're corporate. They've never passed agency standards, but I'll get them into shape soon enough. I wanted to see how they do today. Better than I expected, yet worse than I hoped. I nodded at that. So, since you're private sector, just who am I importing? I can't imagine you've got the same team you used to have, and should I be worried about this coming back around to my suppliers? Generally, the agency didn't mind if I did side work, but this was, well, it was different. My demons were struggling a little with how to proceed here. Friends were hard to come by, and I wanted to keep this one. But pissing off my employers was a big no-no. I've assembled a new team. They're all independent, so there are no conflicts of interest. Besides, who's going to tell them? Me. I'm going to tell them. You know I have to. And even if I didn't have to, I'd still do it. Until I'm sure that they won't mind, I'm going to tread carefully. He sighed and nodded, obviously understanding my concerns. Should I even ask what you're going to go in to get? When I took over for the company, I found a number of discrepancies. It turns out the Protectorate had a number of agents in the company stealing secrets to try and boost their own domestic industries. If I can't get the designs back, they'll just beat us to the market. Considering how much the hegemony is struggling to improve exports of a good that they aren't military or narcotic in nature. He glanced my way, but I just smirked. We need to keep our edge and risk the industry folding in on itself. I nodded slowly and thought it over. It was a little odd to think that just being a corporate espionage mission, considering what he was requesting, but I now better understand how he figured it helped the hegemony. So how many am I importing? 6, not including myself, so you'll need space for 8. I glanced over at him as we kept walking through the park. That's bad math, I finally replied. Well, you're coming too. He looked over at me when I stopped and frowned. Why exactly am I coming too? I asked and then raised an eyebrow questioningly. Do you think that I'd pay you to import me and then let you sit back on your ship while I got the team deep in unfriendly territory? Oh no. You're going to be right next to me every step of the way and make damn sure that you also export us. At that I only shook my head. I'm hurt, I said, and I pressed my hand to my chest, truly and deeply hurt that you'd think so little of my friendship. To think that after all that we've been through that you'd think that you'd need to resort to such a tactic to ensure that I would fulfill my end of the bargain. You're coming, he insisted, and I shrugged. Fine. I had to at least protest, so when things go wrong I get a free pass for bitching at you. So who's the team? They're all criminal scum. You'll like them. They'll fit right in. Considering the type of supposed criminal scum I was, and the type he worked with in the past, I suspected that I would indeed like them. I frowned and rubbed my chin as I looked over the team, feeling rather confused. This is a team you assembled. It's more, diverse than I expected. What I meant to say was that they were all Xenos. For rather obvious reasons, agency tactical strike teams were humans. That's because you're too used to the agency work, he replied with a snort. You need to understand that some of the biggest human fanatics out there are Xenos. Should I be worried about any of them? I mean, did you tell them what I normally smuggle? I asked as he shook his head. You're a smuggler, that's all they need to know. But yes, I might suggest that you don't discuss your normal merchandise. I nodded then and waved through one of the mirrors, the strike team. Care to introduce them? He pointed at the one at the front with an M41 rifle. The Xeno had a dark blue-skinned curls of hair and a vertical bone ridges along his face. His thumb on either side of his palm. Other than that, he looked very human, more so than other Xenos. Mutasa comes from the Hericas. Yes, ones you're thinking of. I thought that they were angry about human intervention and our supposed occupation. I asked and he shook his head. Mutasa is one of the tribesmen who is being slaughtering wholesale by the ruling race. So, the rest of the galaxy complains about human interference with the underdeveloped cultures, and he saw saviors who stopped his village and people from being wiped out. I nodded. That would explain why he was a trusted asset then. Her? I asked, pointing at the light red Thalcon female. She was landing up on the Thalcon considered a light machine gun, and what humans would consider a stationary support weapon. Mouseketeer, he replied, and I glanced over to make sure that he wasn't messing with me. Get the frick out of here. Swear to God, she'll show you the tattoo if you like. Most people don't know this, but Thalcon are avid fans of our kids' movies. She was raised watching all that stuff. wanted to immigrate and join the Marines when she got older, but I offered her a job instead. I shook my head slowly as I then pointed to the next Xeno. The Fezzik? The judging from the short stature features and the rounded ears, I figured she was too a female. But from what I understood of the furred Xenos, their females were soldiers and warriors anyway. Aren't they known for the one-on-one duels? Normally, yes. I had to retrain her and change her focus from being a duelist to a commando. I looked over the curious about why he trusted her. I'm helping her pass the bar exam. A lawyer? You brought along a fricking lawyer. A Xeno lawyer at that. He laughed and nodded. She was part of the legal team for some prince who got saved from a messy marriage in Kurzmid by a human lawyer. So she wants to become a hegemony certified lawyer and use our legal system to help other Xenos trapped in restrictive cultures. I thought that over for a moment. So how does being a commander or a duelist fit into being a lawyer? I finally asked. You have to see the Fezzik court. He answered with a shrug before pointing at the Grax loading up the combat shotgun. The Grax resembled a stout armored beetle with thick, shimmering shells in a generally low opinion of other species. But this one didn't seem to mind working with other Xenos. Hex came over because his wife caught shell rot and his veteran's health didn't cover it and the treatment that she needed. Even though the humans obviously don't suffer from shell rot, we have the treatment centers along the border. Arranged for his defection and his trading services for healthcare. I nodded at that. So, let me guess the next one. There were two left. One was in a full environment suit, so I had no idea who or what they were, but the other was wearing a very little, a combat harness, boots, and what looked like an athletic shorts. That's because it was a Sefto. The squid face was fleshy, damp flesh, and amphibious. Plus, they could alter their skin color on the fly, which obviously made for good commando work. But they were notoriously selfish and very rarely fought for other parts with teams, so intervened at the perfect time to save his family from a blood debt. Sort of. When we intervened in the last Kishmid swarm, his family is part of the first wave of Sefto settlers on Nerkesh, and we not only gave them a hegemony citizenship, but let his family keep control of the land that they'd been promised, along with some of the pearl farms. He's wealthier than either one of us, but he wants to contribute to the hegemony in return. So why you? Why not the Marines or something, I asked. The Marines don't allow Xenos with special dietary requirements. I nodded then. I should have remembered that. All right, so who's the last one? I pointed to the Xeno in the suit. That's a Thrasher. He was about to keep talking, but I had pulled him over by his collar and hissed out, "Are you fricking insane? You let a Thrasher on my fricking ship without telling me." He reached up and carefully pulled my hands off of his collar before straightening his suit. I allowed it because he'd never caused me any reason to worry in the past, but this was something else. When was the last time you heard about a Thrasher raid, They're a thing of the past. Between expanding territories and colonization, there's nowhere for them to reside safely. They're being pushed back further and further into the void. This is changing their culture. They can't sustain the death cult, and some of their shaman have begun looking for new paths. We can either leave them in the void without guidance, or we can take up action and ensure that the Thrashers have a future, more in the line of the hegemonic goals. I frowned, but looked out at the Xeno in the suit who was prepping for the raid. The others didn't seem to treat her any differently, and they were all speaking into some form of English. Maybe he was right. I looked back at him and then wagged a finger his way. "You should have told me." He shrugged. "Now then, we need to get ourselves ready too." I nodded as he said that and turned away for the window to head to my room to get ready. I was heading out of the hangar with John when Reggae came running up. "Wait, boss, there's been some sort of mistake. I'm not flying today." "No, just Donovan and Natasha," I replied, frowning a little, wondering why he looked so distraught. "But this is the first chance to call spy stuff. The others have done it all in the past." I laughed as I realized just why he was upset. "Reggie, this is going to be tight. If we were going into some border world or some backwater Krapistan kind of country, sure. But this is the Protectorate. I need my best, and there will be another time." Reggie was a good pilot, but I really did need my best. Besides, he didn't know the strike team was almost all Xenos, and I didn't want his whole hatred to flare up at the wrong time. Oh, come on! A super cool Black Ops strike team hitting a Xeno installation. That's like the coolest thing ever. I have to go. I laughed once more, and as I shook my head before patting his shoulder, next time. Promise. He looked so heartbroken, I could tell him what we were really stealing, and that might change his mind, but I figured it was more amusing to leave him hanging. We stepped out into the hangar, and then, as I walked along with John, who signaled his team from the other entrance, I stepped aboard Natasha's Scarab with John, and we were joined by the Thrasher and Hex. I eyed the Thrasher for a moment, but the Xeno's face mask just reflected back my own face. Looking over the pilot, I leaned forward and nudged her shoulder. You all set for this? You know you need to be quick. We've done this dozens of times, nothing you haven't done before. So why are you wasting your time staying stupid crap? She said. Promise to keep it under 12 parsecs. I groaned out, and then I saw her grin. Always the same stupid joke, I muttered, and shook my head, tapping my earpiece then. Jasmine, we're all set. We're green, boss, came the reply, and I nodded, giving John the thumbs up. 30 seconds on the clock. 30 seconds, I relayed before John spoke to his team. You've all memorized the layout. You know the mission. This is our first run, but I want to set the tone for everything that we do from here on out. Professional, quick, and no one gets left behind. We don't just do this for a fat paycheck. We do it for ourselves. We do it for the hegemony. I saw the Xenos nodding at that, and was still a little impressed with how he had apparently formed an all-Xeno team of human fanatics. I looked at my watch and set the countdown. When it hit 0, I muttered, Hit it. The ship dropped out of the ink space just as the shuttles were up and rolling out of the hangar. 5 seconds once we were clear as the hangar and the ship blinked out of existence, more than we were driving the planet beneath us. No one but the humans were crazy enough to blink in at the edge of the atmosphere like this, so I was confident that we weren't seen. The Scarab screamed towards the city below, glimmering in the darkness of night. Donovan was in the lead and pulled up in the last minute to avoid slamming into the top of a skyscraper. The Scarab skimmed over the roofs of the city's downtown before coming to a stop above the target. I jumped out, and the manicured garden of the rest of the team and the Scarabs were all already lifting off, and I had even taken a step. Across was the Mutasa and Sefto were already firing, and I saw the 2 guards ahead of us drop. The team crossed the garden quickly, and the Falcon slapped the breaching charge on the door, while the others stacked up on either side. For some reason, the Thrasher was standing clearly in front of the door but a few meters back, and pulled out 2 massive combat knives. I wondered what was going on when the Falcon motioned to her. The Xeno began to sprint forward, and just before she reached the door, the charge went off, blowing it inward. With a full sprint of a Xeno charged through the opening of the pipe past me. I was moving inside when I saw her drop into a slide across the white marble floor inside towards the 2 guards ahead of us. She hooked the guard in the ankle with one knife, yanking his leg out from underneath him, as he fell and jammed the other knife straight into his chest. From there, she rolled to the other guard and tried to level his weapon at her, and drove one knife into his side, yanking down to pull herself up so that she could drive the knife into his throat. With that, she quickly sheathed the knives and drew her assault rifle once more. I had to admit, John had a damn good team. It wasn't just anyone who could work this fast and take down 4 Protectorate guards so simply, especially with their cybernetic enhancements. We quickly moved through the fancy office building to the elevator bank, splitting up into 2 groups of 4. I was with John, Hex, and the Sefto, and as soon as we were inside, the Hex lifted up the Sefto so that he could open up the hatch top and crawl out at the top of the elevator. I was glad I didn't have to do it. John punched the lobby that we wanted. It didn't take long for the magnetic lift to drop us down to the appropriate level, and it opened up into a bright lobby full of Protectorate citizens going about their work even at this late hour. Hex was out first and charging just as the guards spotted him. They began to draw their weapons, but the Beetle was already on them, his shotgun roaring out, catching one in the chest. Then he shoulder-tackled another guard and sent him flying before shooting him in the air. The civilians around us were screaming and running for the exits, as the Falcon picked up the Fexic woman and threw her into the guard post up ahead. The Fexit had 2 SMGs in hand, firing them around wildly as she crashed through the glass of the guard post and killed the guards inside before they could even level the weapons at her. We were running forward when I saw that the guard post next to the elevators ahead were protected by the strong glass. We weren't getting in there very easily, and they had already locked the door. That's when the vent cover from the ceiling dropped down directly onto one of the guards inside, knocking him to the ground. The Sefto dropped out of the ceiling, pistol drawn as he shot the other 2 guards and then landed on the third already pinned by the vent cover. Then he hit the button and the elevators opened. John and I took one while Mutasa and the Thrasher took the others, leaving 4 behind to guard the lobby. So far, things were going pretty damn well. Hey, hold the elevator. I heard a voice call out and frowned for a moment before reaching out and stopping the doors with my hand. The others ahead looked a bit confused, and then I saw a courier round the corner. I laughed as a woman quickly ran into the elevator with us and then pant as to catch her breath, hands on her knees. "Really?" John asked. "You thought you'd catch a ride with us after we shut up the lobby?" I'm a courier," she muttered as she panted. "No quasar, asteroid, solar flare, war, or supernova shall stop me from my job." She straightened up and then but more recovered. "For I am the Imperial Hegemony Courier, and so long as my lungs carry breath, I shall continue. I will bring the message, I shall carry the package, and I will deliver them to our citizens. The hegemony reaches all, and so do the couriers." "That is why I love you guys," I mentioned. "What floor?" She looked at something in her hand and then, "Sub-basement 3. I hit the button for her then. It was the floor below where we were going. "I bet you wish you'd brought your compact gear," I mentioned, and then she snorted. "Yeah, well, I wasn't expecting a strike team to be hitting this building. Should I be worried about something the Protectorate is doing here?" she asked, and I shook my head. "Corporate stuff," I replied. She nodded slowly. "Ah, that explains it." I thought it over for a moment. Did I really need to worry about her telling someone about us? I tugged on the pack of cigarettes from my pocket. "Smokes?" She looked at me and the pack and then up at me. "Are you offering me one? Or the pack? 'Cause I don't smoke." I pushed the pack towards her. "The pack." She took it and tucked it into her satchel with a nod. "Thanks, they make good bribes. I guess you're a fan of couriers?" she asked, and I smirked. "You could say that we're in a related industry, and I respect you guys." She looked us over and slowly in our executive battle gear and clutching weapons that will likely cost more than her annual salary. "Maybe I should try the private sector," she muttered before the elevator let out a ding and opened up on the floor. "Well, hope you find what you're looking for. Good luck." "Thanks, you too," I replied with a smile and a nod before I stepped out to meet John with the Matassa and the Thrasher. There were 3 dead guards strewn across the checkpoints, and Matassa was kneeling before the door's keypad behind. "What's wrong?" John asked as he could see the Xeno struggling with the datapad. "The code doesn't work," he replied, and then ripped a keypad from the wall, squeezing the cables in his hands till the lights around us dimmed for a moment. I forgot his species could absorb some electricity. The door then opened as he stood up, but they didn't properly surge protect the door lock. John and the Thrasher pulled the door open before slipping inside. We headed inside, weapons raised, but there was nothing here except computers and servers. We stopped in front of one and John nodded to me, as this time it was for me to do the only thing that he trusted me with. Pulling out a thumb drive from my pocket, I plugged it in and hit the button on the side. "That's it, we're done," I asked, and he nodded. I loved it when a plan was going so well. We headed out the back of the elevator, and when it opened, Natasha and the Thrasher quickly trained their guns on the courier inside, but I pushed the guns down and stepped inside. "Quick delivery." "Yeah, seems like you guys weren't slow either." I nodded and I hit the button for the lobby. We all stood inside the elevator in silence, but as we got close to the lobby we could hear the muffled gunfire. "If you guys get me shot, I'm going to be pissed," she mentioned as I chuckled as the door opened and we poured out. The Thalcon was standing up ahead, her gun roaring off down the hallway, as I watched a stream of casings fly from the side, clattering across the marble floors. The courier ducked down a different hall, and as we crossed the lobby, the Cepho and Fexec were activating smoke grenades and tossing them all over the place. I hopped into the first elevator with John, Hex, and Matassa, while the others took the second as smoke filled the lobby. I checked my watch. We were 5 seconds behind schedule, but we should have another 15-second window left. The elevators opened on the top floor, and we were rushed out into the gardens. I kept staring at my watch. 5, 4, 3, 2... Then Natasha and Donovan screamed over the edge of the roof and brought the scarabs down in the garden. We jumped in before we were up and flying and leaving the city behind us. As I looked back at the gleaming city in the darkness, I chuckled and looked at John. Neither one of us even fired our guns. Hey, when you're good at picking talent as we are, why do we have to work ourselves? I nodded at that. True enough. I looked over at the Thrasher and the Beetle like Zeno next to me. I put a great pride in humanity's ability to fight our own demons, but perhaps I didn't give us enough credit. We were pretty good at making friends, or in the case of strike teams, we were just leaving atmosphere when the ship popped back into reality. The scarabs quickly flew into the hangar before pulling back hard on the throttle to keep us from crashing into the far side once we settled down. Then 5 seconds later, we were back in ink space. Reggie approached as we stepped out of the shuttles, and we were clearly surprised to see the Xenos, but he ignored them and spoke to John. So, what do we do? Steal battleship designs, intel on protectorate assets or something? Did we silence them all? John frowned and I grinned wide as he looked at me over. You didn't tell him. I shook my head and John sighed out. I don't work for the agency anymore. I work for Sapphire Silks. John started to walk away and then leaving a stunned and confused kid behind him. The lingerie company? He asked and I just began to laugh. My demons inside were grinning as well. If this was the sort of missions I could expect from the corporate world, I'd need to expand my services. Money is money. And if you aren't prepared to deal with the surgical strike teams to defend your interests from the defensive industry to the fashion industry, then you weren't ready to play with humanity. The lesson that the Protectorate had learned today. And that, my friends, is the end of this Reddit Quickie. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support the channel or the author, all the stuff is down below. And as always, I hope that you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next story. Cheers.